The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tina from the MParks office. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I just wanted to let you know that all attendees are in listen-only mode, so you are not able to speak, but you can participate by asking questions in the questions box or talking in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar, and the panel will do their best to address those questions and comments throughout. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Clay to get started.
Thanks, Tina. And I want to welcome everybody to this specific webinar. And we'll do some quick introductions of our panelists, two of whom you can see on your screen or should be able to see. Jeff Muck, Director of Parks, Recreation, Cultural Services in the City of Novi. And Jeff is our Directors Focus Group Chairman. Been very involved in helping the association right now through this process. Arnold Weinfeld, former MParks board member, now public policy chairman, and I always mess up his title, but at Michigan State University and in public engagement, I believe I'm saying that right, Arnold.
You're fine.
And then on the phone, not on your screen, but is Ron Olson, our Chief of Parks and Recreation Division with the Department of Natural Resources. And to give you just a quick overview, I want to kind of set the stage and let you know why we're doing this. As you all know, a couple of weeks ago, a survey came out. The survey was kind of put together by the MParks Board of Directors, or some Board of Directors that I had been in contact with and in communication with about really needing to find out what some of the major issues that our public agency membership were having related to COVID-19 and all of the things that are happening to you within your local communities. And so that survey kind of circulated for a couple of weeks, started to populate some very interesting data for us. I reached out to Jeff and Arnold and Ron and a few others and said, you know, kind of once we have this information, do you think we could put together a small task force of leadership to kind of analyze it, look at what maybe the top 7 or 10 issues might look like to the membership, and then through that, offer some sort of guidance and leadership to the governor's office. And whether that's putting together a brief white paper or some bullet points on, you know, things that you as members need clarification on. And you should be able to see on your screen a shared document that kind of has 7 things on there, and Jeff's going to go through them a little bit more in detail and give you some guidance there. But really, this is to kind of help get your voice to the right folks within the big white building in downtown Lansing in the governor's office. Having Ron Olson, both as just a longtime member of MParks, as a past president, as a leader across the state in many different roles, and as our state parks chief, to kind of help us be that conduit to get to that end. I think that's awesome, and we appreciate Ron's input, and Ron will have a chance to speak next a little bit about what's happening there. But just knowing that these folks are interested in helping us get answers, and that MParks is going to be a conduit for information and have the ability to help with some messaging, but not necessarily going to give you black and white answers to everything we're dealing with. So I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork as to why the survey was done, what we've kind of gleaned out of that survey, what these guys are seeing now as boots on the ground professionals, also willing to answer some questions from you guys at the end. But with that, hopefully that gives you just a broad enough overview of why we're doing what we're doing. And it's really to help get some answers. I would like, because Ron's got to jump off at 1:30, I want to turn it over to Ron and let him talk a little bit about state parks and his role of being able to get some of this information to the right folks and kind of what they're seeing as some of the biggest issues that this survey is kind of bringing to light. Ron, can you take just a few minutes and kind of cover some things for our membership?
Yeah, thank you. Just to start with, what I want to remind people of is that the original executive orders, it seemed like 6 months ago, but was really literally weeks ago. The first main order that came out that identified the stay-at-home order and all the things you already know. But one of the key things I wanted to remind you of is that in there, specifically, state, county, and local parks were mentioned as a relevant activity, and it was valued to ensure that people could get outdoors and recreate, and how important that was. So I think that keep that in mind as you think about all of these things, that's a positive, because it could have been the other way around where that could have been banned. But the key words in that order were sanitary and safe. And so since that time, we've pivoted off of that. Obviously overlaid with that is the fear and the dynamics of employees and what that might meant. Obviously the areas where there was a chance to have people gather, such as indoor buildings and activity areas, playgrounds, and all those sorts of things, even including disc golf courses and dog areas and things like that where people could gather. Now I realize that some of you all have those open and some closed, but we have a lot of that stuff, and we closed those down. We closed our headquarter buildings. We offered free passes to avoid having to make transactional activities with selling passes or passports and that kind of stuff. And of course, camping was prohibited, partly because of the time of year somewhat, but also because it created that perhaps a gathering spot. Big events or any gatherings of any sort went from a few hundred to 100 to 50 to 0, all in a matter of a very short time. And I know lots of events were canceled, and they remain, things evolve. We've had some big things like the Grand Prix was canceled, and some other major events, whether they're 1,000+ trail runners to triathlons to bike races to all kinds of stuff. So we've seen an evolution of things, but just as obviously there's been challenges, but a couple of things of recent time. Executive Order 77 is something to pay attention to, and that starts to define what restart outdoor work that could be done by people, which then helps inform and define what we believe could be done. Now, grass mowing and things like that were started because that was something that was seen as a non-essential activity. Well, now that's changed, and we're working on now is articulating details as to can we have staff go out and start working on de-winterizing buildings and preparing facilities to restart in the summer. And so something like that, we can help any of you with that. I'm not going to dive into all those details now because we don't have time, but there's a lot of things going on there, and we're helping to shape that information by interpreting the rules. And we have a checklist now that we are launching off, and by the first of the week, we should have some decisions made on that. That also includes safety protocols for the employees and what they must wear, and equipping them with the proper tools in that regard, PPEs as referred to. One of the examples of activities, and of which there are many, and some of which are listed in the survey that Jeff will cover, was camping. And we've had a lot of inquiries about that. And the governor has indicated that they want to make sure that the health advisors and everything, but our target goal is June 22nd, if we can get everything prepared by that time. And but the orders have to comply. So this still remains fluid. And that also applies to things like swimming pools and other kinds of activities that that people are still in limbo about. And so as time goes on, I think once we get some of the outcomes of this, we can help guide some of that stuff to get answers that we have. I should say that we talked about the 6-step program of the governor mentioned the other day about Restart. We're kind of in phase 3, and we believe a lot of what we do is in the probably the 5th or 6th step in that process. So we got a little ways to go before clarity is going to come. We do have very robust operational plans that we've developed for state parks that cover many types of things that some of you might be interested in. But what we found is we benchmarked with other states and other communities. The Metro Parks, Oakland County Parks, Wayne County Parks, and Washtenaw, we collaborate regularly to compare and contrast what people are doing. And so we need to all continue to do that. There's no one single answer, and so we need to stay tight on that. But we do have information we'd be glad to share. One thing that I will say that with the Memorial Weekend coming up, we are very mindful of carrying capacity and crowding conditions with understaffed circumstances, because we, like you, we hire almost 2,000 summer workers and we haven't hired any. And things look positive that we'll get we have hiring freezes like many of you. So we're trying to figure out what we can do with minimal staffing and signage and warnings and all that kind of stuff. And we've been through that. We have good sign examples and stuff like that, but we've got some formulas that we're working on to try to close parks and areas before they get overcrowded and overwhelmed. The only other thing, last thing I'll mention is there's an outdoor recreation advisory committee that also engages the private sector, and there's a committee forming on that to inform eventually the governor's office on external private entities. And some of you have concessioners that do stuff for you. We have people that provide that. We have a lot of them too. And so they're interested in restarting their business too. So that group will help inform that decisions as well. So those are some highlights. I know it's not a lot of detail, but like I said, as time goes on, if people want to know what kind of good messaging signs, what are some good strategies to get people's attention to social distance and stuff like that, that we definitely can help provide you with stuff from all 50 states that we have contacts with, along with obviously Clay and others have gathered stuff from other states and local parks and rec units as well. So
thanks, Ron.
I know that's a lot of stuff, but I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ron. Clay, do you want to pick up on a bit of what Ron talked about the Outdoor Recreation Advisory Commission and discussions you may have been having with Brad Garman over there?
Yeah, thanks, Arlen. I did want to jump in before we turn it over to Jeff. Ron mentioned, and Brad Garman is the director of the Outdoor Recreation Advisory Council, a newly created position within the state, kind of representing obviously the outdoor industry and outdoor interest as it relates to the industry, as well as some of us that are boots on the ground running large tracts of open space for the public. But had an opportunity, and Ron had the same conversation, opportunity to speak with Brad Garman yesterday as they're formulating this new work group. To have MParks obviously have a seat at the table on that work group, as well as kind of intertwine what we're doing here as a small task force for our association into the bigger picture within ORAC. And when you look at ORAC, I mean, they have some heavy hitters on that board. They've got folks from Carhartt and REI and some other major industry leaders, as well as some major partners that we have with Blue Cross Blue Shield across the board there, and executive director from Heart of the Lakes and some other partner organizations. So the ability to kind of have our own little task group kind of working on everything that our surveys kind of laying out in front of us, to work on getting something to the governor's office, but also to work on that platform as a larger conglomerate of groups, and having MParks represented is also just a great opportunity for us to have our voice heard. I do want to touch on something else Ron said real quick, and then I'll turn it over. We also are working across multiple state agencies to gather information, and I probably get, and this is no doubt, I probably get 100 emails a day from other state association execs doing what I do about what's going on in their state. Some of it's relevant to what we're doing, some of it is not, because each state's kind of approaching things differently. Some have better ins with their governor's office than others, so they're able to get more information quickly. Some associations have chosen to become just a gathering place of documents and information, and some have chosen to make, actual statements in the press. So there's a lot of different ways that our association partners are tackling this. This is how we felt to be most useful to our association, is to really kind of work behind the scenes with the information we now have to get some concrete recommendations, or at least some things that we see that we can do to open some of our facilities responsibly and safely to the governor's office. So that's the last thing I'll say there, but that definitely is exciting work to potentially work with ORAC and have MParks have a seat at the table with that. So thanks for bringing that up, Ron and Arnold, letting me kind of expand on that. So
hey, Jeff,
I think
before you jump in, I've got a question. I know Ron is leaving here shortly. John, we've got a question that asks about Memorial Day approaching and thoughts on state beaches. Obviously, the stay-at-home order goes past Memorial Day, with Memorial Day being a little bit early this year. What are the thoughts on state beaches? Any thought to restricting them to just county residents, or what's the talk on that?
Well, what we've been saying is that, first of all, we have many beaches, some of the areas are designated swimming areas and some are not. And so when we're talking about beaches, that's a broad topic, but designated swimming beaches, we are hoping to plan to have enough staff to mark them, because we also have to have the water tested to make sure if people do go into the water, whether we have the designated swim area or not, is safe to go in regards to health things. The second thing is that we are not planning to close beaches, but what we are doing is we put up at many of our busy parks already these big highway kind of construction signs that very vividly at the entrance indicate that social distancing is required. And we will be making announcements, bullhorn announcements, and our law enforcement people over the Memorial weekend will be very proactive to announce, to tell people and warn them to separate. And that's what we're planning to do. We know that some areas like Lake Michigan and those big beaches, the water is still in the high 40s, low 50s. So the wind and the coolness will be there, but if it does get really warm, but our plan is to have them open. But the point that's being made here is that just because those beaches are open doesn't mean that travel restrictions aren't still in place. And so we're indicating to people, if you're going to recreate, stay close to home, and don't, just because the beaches are available doesn't mean that you can travel. But right now, we just have to follow the executive order that it's been said, don't travel distances, but they didn't indicate how far and what the penalties would be. So we're hoping that people use good judgment, but we've known from our experience in the last couple of weeks that people will still travel despite that parameter. So
yeah. Thanks,
that's
Ron.
kind of where we are with all that.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's turn it over to Jeff to talk about the results of the survey that Clay mentioned earlier.
Thanks, guys. So just wanted to jump back a little bit into what the task force, how it evolved, and what conversations we had with this. Be remiss if I didn't mention that we also had Kendall Klingelsmith, former past president and director of Petoskey, who helped us with this as well, along with myself, Arnold, Clay, and Ron. But our conversation really focused on looking at these survey results that you can see here and how to best narrow these down and get the message to the governor with some frequently asked questions that could be answered, and also offering our advice as an association to help them make some decisions to get some of our facilities open back up. I see we have a question on the chat about somebody asking about advocating for things opening up. And that's a lot of what this came out of. This discussion came from Clay and I were talking about who was talking to the governor about golf courses and who was talking to the governor about landscaping companies. They were doing it themselves. They were advocating for themselves, and they were saying, this is how we can do it. And I think you're starting to see that happen again with beauticians, with restaurants, and some of those other kind of jobs that are saying, this is how we can open things back up safely. So this task force really, we started talking about this and looking at the survey results and saying, how can we narrow this down and give the governor's office some very specific items that we think we can address, and give them examples from other states that they could follow and use as a resource. That we felt would really be the role of MParks. We don't think that the governor's office is going to come out and, for instance, tell us in number 7, understanding how to handle crowd control or movement patterns for the public to ensure distancing standards and safety within buildings. We don't see that as having something where they're going to come out of the governor's office and say, you should put signs here and you should put stickers on the floor here. Those are stuff that our agencies are going to have to start making decisions of on their own and in consultation with their local health departments. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. We're having to make a lot of decisions on our own. Don't expect to see that from MParks either. I don't think you're going to see that. I don't think that's the role of MParks, is to put out those very specific things as far as guidelines and strategies, maybe for group gatherings. It's just those are on us right now as individuals. What we have to focus on are the big picture items that we want the governor's office to address and advocate for our pressing needs. And we really, I agree, and I think our task force agreed with those main bullet points. Most of them fell under number 5, guided phases for reopening specific to Parks and Recreation. Giving the governor's office some ideas of what that means for opening our restroom facilities, what that means for opening our campgrounds, what that means for opening playgrounds. I know we have a lot of programmers on this call. Day camps, that is such a pressing issue for everyone right now. Are we going to follow the CDC guidelines, or are we going to follow what they've already put out? So, or is the health department going to put anything out from the state? So that's really the next step of this, is to take these main survey results, lump them under number 5, guided phases for reopening specific to Parks and Recreation, not only the facilities, but the programs. Align those with the phases, as Clay mentioned, the 6 phases, or Ron might have mentioned that, of the 6 phases, and advocate and recommend where each of those would fall under those phases. For instance, would playgrounds be under number 4? And we would recommend that playgrounds be under number 4. So that's kind of where we went with this task force. Kind of turn that back over to you, Arnold, for any follow-up or thoughts on the next steps of how we're going to get this into the governor's office. And I think we got about 5 more minutes of Ron, too, if he wanted to weigh in on that as well.
So I do think, so thanks, Jeff, Clay, and Ron, for all that information. I think one of the points to emphasize that Jeff just spoke about is how, the governor's office is going to continue to deliver broad-based orders, whether it's a stay-at-home order or a general phase-in of one industry or another. And as it concerns our own industry, a lot of it will have to be done in consultation with local health departments. So, and that'll hopefully come with some guidance from federal and state health officials. But some of these issues, for sure, are going to have to be handled on the local level in terms of what you're all comfortable with, what your managers are all comfortable with, what your local officials are all comfortable with. Clay and as Ron noted, they have acquired a lot of information from around the country as to what other state organizations are doing. And I know that Clay is making some of those available through the updates. Certainly, I know that we'll be sharing those as an organization with Ron and with Brad Garman over at the Outdoor Advisory Commission as he puts together his work group, so that they understand that there are some strategies out there that are already being used and already being put in place as it concerns parks and recreation across the country and those kinds of departments. So I think at this point, that's the association's role. The association's role moving forward, and Clay can talk about this in a minute, will be to take these items to the board and have the board comment on them, and then formulate this into something of an advocacy document that Clay can use, and you can use. Clay can use when talking to administration officials, but you can use when talking to your local legislators about what your focus is and how you're partnering with your statewide association, who is working with the DNR and Ron Olson and Brad Garman and the Outdoor Recreation Commission on trying to move some kind of phase-in of parks and recreation programming and outdoor recreation open. As Jeff said, in the comment, and Jeff Abel noted and Jeff Muck mentioned about trying to get places open before the end of June. There's a big push. I read another article today about people getting outside. And, you may have seen the articles yourself over the last week as states have loosened up their requirements. People are definitely getting outside and moving about. The warmer weather, and it's coming. I saw the forecast even for next week. The warmer weather certainly will get people outside, and they're talking about being outside as a mental health break and just an overall good thing for everyone. So, I'm hopeful that as this document moves forward and Clay is able to take it to the state and you all are able to begin discussions with your state legislators, they'll begin to understand the importance as well of creating guidelines for reopening Parks and Rec and the programs that you all run.
Yeah, well said, Arnold. Certainly, that is the next phase of this conversation, and we'll allow for some more Q&A here. And I know Ron has got to jump off here in a minute. Ron, did you have anything follow up to that or anything before you got to leave at 1:30?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to just say that we will work very hard to help be a conduit for the message, the appropriate message once that gets formulated from MParks on behalf of the members to find that pathway to the governor's office, because we do have channels that we are using because we communicate back and forth almost every day with them. And so once that gets formed, we will be right there to help make sure that dots get connected. So anyway, but like I said, if anybody has any info they need, and one of the big points was operationalizing these things are the hard part, and talking in general is easy to get guided, but it's great to be able to read how people have operationalized some of this stuff. So don't think past reading somebody else's stuff. You can get a lot of good thoughts under the umbrella of the health regulations and things like that. So thanks a lot. Sorry, but we'll catch up with people as we go.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ron.
Clay, do you want to talk for a minute about what your next step is? I mentioned, taking this to the board and getting their input and sign off.
Yeah. So I think, we've talked a little bit prior to this conversation about next steps, and once we're able to kind of move things forward, it's really going to fall into the hands of your leadership team, your MParks board of directors. which we're trying to pull together some meetings. If there's any board or director on the phone right now and you haven't heard this, it's coming. We're trying to pull together a meeting for next Friday, but what we'd like to do is maybe have some conversation around this to hone in on, as Jeff said, kind of number 5, the guided phases for reopening, and then kind of subsetting everything underneath that and how it fits, and let the board kind of take a crack at kind of putting it into or we'll put it into a format that the board can take action on and tweak and say, yep, this is exactly how we want it to go, so we can create that. And we want to do that within this next week, within these next, let's say, 6 to 7 days, have that completed and done and ready to be moved forward. We don't want to, there's a feeling that the squeaky wheel's getting the grease right now, and if we can get some information in and get some clarification, as Jeff said, many of the landscapers and golf courses, they were contacting folks individually. They weren't waiting, and those were some of the first areas to be opened back up. So again, if we can do this quickly, but also be very concise and be very strategic about how it's delivered, I think we have the best opportunity. And yeah, we'll need to have some board follow up, but that's happening within the next 6 to 7 days, so we can move this forward.
Well, Clay.
And yeah, I mean,
Clay, I wouldn't beat yourself up too hard. I think it's important to remember that landscape operators and even golf course owners were making a legitimate argument that they could do their practice with social distancing, and that's a different kettle of fish sometimes for the programs that our folks operate, such as the day camps, for instance. So I think in the beginning there was a way, there was an effort to identify those disciplines, those businesses that could maybe get back to work pretty quickly because social distancing is something that's part of their everyday routine. But I do think you're right about having a coordinated effort between the membership and our association and state agencies. So, Mark, I can tell you that I played tennis yesterday at a high school tennis court right near me, and there were other people out there, so I wasn't the only one.
So yeah, and I was going to jump in. I think that's a little bit of what we're looking for too, that I'm hearing the most from fellow directors, are things like tennis courts and pickleball courts and the playgrounds. Those are the big things for us. Can they be reopened with signage? Can they be reopened knowing that we need to maintain social distancing? We're getting the arguments of why can the golf courses be open but tennis can't? So I think that is part of this document and part of what we need to really push for clarification on, because it's changing from county to county even, and even municipality to municipality. So we don't have our nets up in Novi. I don't think a lot of places in Oakland County do, but the next county over, they may, or over in the Lansing area, Arnold, like here is, they're wide open. So that's again pushing for a lot of those type of amenities under this phases.
Yeah, and if I can comment to that, I think the frustration that I'm hearing from our membership, and many of you may be on the phone right now or on this webinar, is that as the process is going on to do some of these phases and reopening, things are different from region to region across the state, and the way things are potentially in Oakland and Wayne and Macomb are not necessarily the same as they are in Clinton, Ingham, and Eaton is not necessarily the same as they are in Wexford and Grand Traverse and Emmett. So there's all these dynamics going on across the state, but everybody's held to one kind of standard box as far as these regulations go. And so I think that's another hot button frustration from some folks across the state, is that we can do this here, but we're not able to because we understand it's not able to be done effectively in other parts of the state. So all of those things kind of working together has created a level of frustration, but again, is the reason why we're trying to get a lot of this information in front of the governor at some point here in the very near future with, you know, backing from our board of directors and leaders like Jeff and Arnold within our association. And so I just say that we hear you. We hear that as a frustration point. We understand it. We get it. But the reality is the situation we're working in within the executive orders don't say anything about regionally or open phased in approaches regionally. So we're kind of all hamstrung by that. So I don't know, Arnold, just from a policy perspective, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with across the state, I'm sure, in all different walks of life.
I don't think there's any question about it. You know, there was a lot of discussion a couple of weeks ago about the regional piece, and then you actually saw people from up north, business owners and others saying, we don't want you all from Southeast Michigan coming up here right now. And it was noted, I saw a report where I think it was Iosco County had, or one of the counties that had no cases, all of a sudden had some cases as people decided to come up to their cabins and the like. So Tim Foss asked if there's any guidance evolving on how long social distancing may last. Tim, there was an article on MLive, I think today it was, that Tina just passed along, that it looks like the governor is thinking about allowing small gatherings of 10 or less after the May 28th date is passed. So whatever occurs, I think it's throughout society. I think we can all expect it to be phased in, no matter what it is, no matter what that restriction has been right now to this point. As things, quote, open up, they are not going to open up all at once. There will be a phase in for everything.
Yeah, so Arnold, if I could jump in, because I saw Emily Stevens had asked a question about reopening with respect to safety and making sure that's factored in. You know, I want to, for an example, what we did here at the start of this is we set specific dates. We were going to cancel everything to this date. You know, and then this kept going on, and it was, okay, we're canceling every program to this date. Our staff now has pivoted. We're not doing hard and fast dates for cancellation on everything. We're going more on a week or 2 week basis and looking out even a month. Like, for instance, with the release of golf, you know, we're going to be getting our senior golf league back up and running. But are we going to put 60 seniors into our community center for bridge? No, that's probably 6 months. That could be 6 months out. So it's our staff is retraining their mindset that we're not doing you know, specific maybe course sessions. That's going to be individual programs or some sets of programs rolling out every month or every couple of months based on what the current conditions are. And like I said about tennis, you know, can we do a tennis league? It's one-on-one, maybe, but right now the county is leaning towards keeping those tennis courts closed. So I know it's a struggle to my fellow directors and all of our programmers who are on the line, but we've always prided ourselves on being flexible, and we're definitely getting put to the test on it this now.
I think there was one question back up that we didn't get to. Our programs like softball still being delayed to start. So many are canceling then for the entire summer already. And I know that upcoming, and from what I'm hearing again, a lot of stuff is still being delayed as it relates to softball, baseball leagues. You know, your large summer tournaments where there are multiple teams coming in from all over the place, whether they be USA softball tournaments that many of you host in your community, or just local summer festival type tournaments where you've got 30, 40 teams coming in and you've got beer tents or whatever may be a part of a summer festival. I don't see that stuff happening. Darren Dystemars from West Michigan and Holland Township, also Stu Alderman, they both represent the USA softball program here locally in the state of Michigan. They're both going to be preparing and putting together a panel discussion post May 28th. They were not willing to have some sort of webinar on that, not knowing what was going to happen in another week and a half on reopening guidelines. But They're going to put something together too as far as a webinar or educational situation on what USA Softball is kind of saying, and we've got some of that information connected to our website. But those two have also said if anybody wants to reach out to them as a resource as it relates to softball and leagues and those kind of things, they certainly would be willing. And they both represent the National Association. So
I
not
believe
the
they
answer you're looking for.
No, but
What?
I believe they did put something out on the USA Softball Facebook page today with some potential guidelines or questions
Okay.
for reopen. I just glanced at it real quick today, but it is out there.
Okay. I didn't see that, but I've been seeing it as they've been forwarding it on to me. So. I'm gonna just comment real quick to Emily's thing too, and I don't want anybody to think that we're more focused on getting things open and not focused on safety. I think that's why MParks has had hesitation to step out and say, here's some guidelines that you all should be looking at to follow. I don't know that that's our role. I think this is a health issue, and Arnold said this over and over. This is a health issue that the likes that we've never seen before. And we're kind of all rowing the canoe together, learning things around each bend. I just want the membership to know that through our leadership, both with our board and with our chairs here, we're looking at ways to engage with our elected officials at the state level to help get you some more guidance. It's not about advocating for reopening one thing over another at this point, at least in my view. It's really just about hopefully trying to gain access to some information that can be helpful from the state government. So that's really where these conversations started to come up from. Kelly had one. I'll read it. Kelly Heyer, also board member. For those senior centers on this call that are located in Oakland County, the health department is doing a call tomorrow at 2:30. So a great informational piece. Thanks for sharing that, Kelly. 2:30 tomorrow, Oakland County Health Department. Clay from Lori Irwin. Can you mention that we're working on creating access to resources for programming facilities such as shared Google Docs, webinars, and roundtables? Yes. Lori is our board member at large. She's working very hard right now to create some Google Docs, some webinars around summer camps, special events, some other areas of programming. It was also on the NERPA regional group call today. They already have that. They have some of that already in place at within NERPA. NERPA's created a Google Docs where many of their members of NERPA are uploading information. And so they're willing to share that as well. So I just think the more we can do to help educate, the more we can do to help distribute information that you all can take the time to read through and pick and pull apart the pieces that make sense for your community is going to be really the way that we all get through this. And we'll do our best to be that conduit. I don't know, Jeff or Arnold, if you have any comments to that or not, but.
Now we'll continue to work, through the Public Policy Committee, and I know that all the other groups are, as Lori's noted, doing what they can to keep their own disciplines up to speed with information as well. Thanks, Tina, for posting that USA Softball article that Jeff mentioned to everyone. So, I want to thank Clay and Tina and MPark staff just for the work that they're doing to keep everyone informed and be as transparent as possible with information that's coming across their desk. I know it's a frustrating situation. There's just no doubt about it. And as Clay noted, and I think I've said from the beginning, most of the decisions that will be made will be local decisions in concert with your public health departments and your elected officials, whether your top official is a mayor, a township supervisor, a county executive, a county administrator, or manager, whatever it may be. So, you should be, and if you're not already, forcing your way into a table that includes your that city manager and whoever runs local public health. You all should be collaborating together on as these orders come down, as things begin to phase open.
One of the things to build on that, and I said this to a couple groups, somebody brought up, and I'm just sharing with this with the group because I thought it was interesting. Somebody brought up on a call the other day that they run day camps for their community, and based on the guidance they're getting, they're going to be shutting down day camps. They're just not set up in this community to be able to responsibly do day camps in the way that it's going to need to be done. And that person, city manager, said, well, I guess that's a problem because that's what you do, and I don't know that we're going to need that position then if we don't have day camps. And so my response to that question, and I give this to anybody on the call, is I certainly would be willing to go to bat as the executive director of MParks that we all have different roles and functionality right now during this pandemic. If you're not running day camp, you're sure as heck doing something else. I mean, you're able to pivot and do other things that are benefiting your community and your parks and recreation. And shame on that city manager for thinking that all you do is summer day camps, when we know that's not what a summer day camp person or a rec supervisor who supervises summer day camps, they have many other roles that they're doing throughout the day. So as an association, we are also willing to advocate locally for you, and not that I'm going to be able to travel in and go to city council meetings and go to bat for you personally, but certainly if there's a document or something that we can provide that talks about how essential parks have become during this pandemic and how our staff members, even though they've been specific to certain areas, are now taking on other roles to be productive and useful in this time of a pandemic, we certainly would be able to draft such a letter of support for you locally. And I say that just because it hurts me to think that people are being looked at as, geez, you're our summer day camp supervisor, we're not going to have it, so you're no longer essential on our team, we're going to let you go. I understand the budget issue, I understand money not coming in, but to make the statement that that's all you do, we don't need you, in my book is not okay for any city manager to say, based on what we're doing right now. Layoffs may be inevitable and certain things might be happening in communities that we can't help just because of budgetary issues, but I'm here to support you however I can, and go to bat for you wherever I can. We got time for a few other questions as they're popping up.
Teresa Burgess asked if anyone on the call from Wayne County has seen anything from the Wayne County Health Department, that she hasn't seen a lot of information from them.
I will say it's been interesting on how some county health departments have stepped up and reached out and how some have not. Some are waiting for folks to reach out, and when you do, they're saying we don't have mandates from the state, so we're not able to help you. I mean, I know that's been a frustration point for some members. Hey, you keep telling us to reach out to local health department, but every time I do, they tell me the state hasn't given us any guidelines, so we can't give any to you. So there's that in play too, Arnold. Is there any questions on here, guys, that we missed?
Not that I'm seeing right now. Everyone's hanging with us too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's,
I hope that folks are finding, I mean, there's not, I hope that folks are finding this work and these kinds of sessions helpful. Not a lot of concrete answers, but I like the progression that we're doing here. The survey, I think, is going to provide a lot of guidance to Clay and the board and to you all as well at the local level moving forward in terms of how do we advocate for, a safe phased opening of the programs and services that are provided by Parks and Rec departments all over the state. So I think Clay and the association have good entree into the administration, both through Ron Olson and Brad Garman. Because when the folks in the governor's policy office wonder what to do about parks and outdoor rec, those are the two people they're going to turn to. So,
yeah. Yeah, and I certainly would say, you know, and this isn't a formal call to action, but there will be one. I mean, if you have contact with your local reps and senators and have the ability to reach out to just kind of feel them out and see where they're hearing, you know, the governor's office, where they're hearing whether they're hearing anything on our specific issues that we're talking about here. Try and, you know, get some of that information. I know Kelly Heyer reached out to her local rep and was able to share some information that the information isn't always even there at that level at some points as it relates to certain issues, because they're just not at that point yet of the phased-in approach. So it's all kind of gray, and that's what makes it so hard.
Clay, that's a great point. If as you all talk to local legislators to see what they're hearing, and you're communicating with them, or even articles. You know, Jeff pointed out the one from USA Softball today that, you know, that you see out there. You know, you should feel free to send them on to Clay and Tina and the staff. There's only so many days and an hour for each and every one of us, and it should never be assumed that any one person has seen the same thing or had the same conversation that you have. So help Clay out and the association out as much as you can as well.
Yeah. Jeff, any parting thoughts before we wrap this up here with a few minutes left?
No, I just want to thank, there's a core group of people that keep contacting me and sharing their thoughts around the state. And, you know, that's meant a lot to me. I hope that's meant a lot to them, because that's the core of what MParks is about. Taking a lot of those discussions have led into what we're doing here. It's led into what we do here in my department. So don't lose contact with your peers. It's really important, and it's very, very helpful. So,
Clay, you see the question from Stephanie about come out and play there?
Yeah, so that's actually a piece that's on our website now. The come out and play quests, some of the pieces of come out and play we have put on our website as free and usable. So we did that quite a while ago, and we kind of put that out to the membership that it's there. Again, we can repost that, and Tina's kind of hosting this call with us, and she can repost that. But I think there are bits and pieces of come out and play if you've either purchased it in the past, so you have access to some of the content, or you want certain pieces of it right now. We're certainly not concerned with selling it as much, you know, as a profit center, which is what it was created for, was to kind of be a profit center and hopefully give you summer camp activity guides. But right now, some of it you can't get to just because of the way it's set up, but like the quests and the games and some of that stuff is already on our website. Tina just posted the page on our virtual wellness page of where that's at under physical activity. So utilize that as well. Tina did a fantastic job of putting together that virtual wellness stuff on our website. And there's just a ton of information posted under those different headings. So yes, Steph, and we can talk offline too if you're getting at more than just some of those quests and game activities.
Super. Thank you.
So Stu's got one, Arnold.
Yeah,
you mentioned the board. You mentioned the board meet.
We talked about that before the call, as a matter of fact. So.
I missed. Were you responding to Stu's?
Yes, but you can,
okay,
because we had talked about it.
Yeah, you mentioned the board will meet late next week to approve direction. Any way to move that up? Yeah. So Jeff is smiling because he's the one who said we can't wait till next Friday. So yeah, we're going to try to move that along, and I've been texting with some board members here as we've been on the call about moving that conversation up very quickly, and even have something that has, you know, approval of the board via email prior to Friday. We'll officially vote, but maybe have something of content by Tuesday or Wednesday to start to push. So yes, Stu, that's a moved up agenda item And Jeff can snicker because he was of the same thought. Like that's
And
too
I
late.
did, and I didn't text Stu to say that either. So just
You're
Stu's
lying.
channeling.
So yeah, good comment, Stu, and very relevant, and definitely will move that along quickly. Anything else for the good of the cause? I appreciate my fellow members on the panel. I appreciate those 60-some folks who were on the call. It's unfortunate we can't say yes and no and go and stop, but we can continue to be resource. Jeff hit the nail on the head. If I'm boots on the ground director or programmer, my first call is going to boots on the ground director or programmer in a neighboring city to talk about what they're doing, and use your association. And what we're here for is to get policy stuff listened to. But when you're talking about what communities are doing, nobody knows best than the communities next door in your region or across the state. And I think that is a key. Continuing to network with your peers in similar positions and similar community sizes, I always found was the best way to get information and to sell my higher ups on the fact that we're kind of all doing this together in concert rather than each making individual decisions if we're close in community based. So anyways, I'm off my soapbox there.
Thanks to Tina for technical
yeah.
work here.
Yeah, so if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and we'll end the call just here just a few minutes before 2 o'clock at 1:57. I think we got through quite a bit in 57 minutes, which is fantastic. And if anybody has any lingering questions, shoot them to me and I'll get them to the right people.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.